Welcome to Growing into Your Community. What's after high school? Please put any questions you may have during our session into the chat, and we will answer them as we get to them or at the end of the session. And if you're applying for continuing education credits, please make sure your full name is displayed on your Zoom screen. If you need to rename yourself on Zoom, please take a moment to do that now. Thank you. Hello, my name is Virginia Harrison. I am Bridge Builder Project Manager with Love Inc., Living Our Visions Inclusively. And we're so glad to have all of you here today for our presentation. And Lauren, my colleague, and Nicole Lee, a self-advocate, are my co-presenters. And we're going to start with introductions and then a poll question to get us all started and get to know who's here with us today. Nicole, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hello, my name is Nicole Lee. I'm 21 years old. I live in Sun Prairie, Wisconsin. I have been with Love Inc. since March 2020. Recently graduated from Sun Prairie High School in 2019. Graduated adult transition program in 2021. My interests are working at Goodwill, karate, and Penguin Project.
Perfect. Thank you, Nicole. I am Lauren Dettmer. I am the community organizer for Love Inc. I oversee some of the projects we do, as well as work with Nicole in our peer mentoring group.
Thanks, everybody. All right, I am going to put what we call a poll question into the chat, and we would like for you to have a look at that question and send us a response back in the chat. I will also read those questions for you. All right. So our question is, how connected to your community are you? Or you can also answer a similar question, how connected to your community do you feel? So whichever one resonates more for you, go ahead and type that into the chat so everyone can see it. How connected to your community are you? Or how connected to your community do you feel?
Do I have to answer this question as well?
Well, like when we practiced yesterday, Nicole, if you would like to, that might be a great way to get folks started so that they have a sense of what we're talking about. So if you'd like to role model that, that'd be amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, so we're having a few people comment that they feel very connected, which is great. We love hearing that. And I'm sure that did not always come easy for everybody, which is why we're here. Yeah, Tara's working on growing her connections. Our self-advocate, Nicole, will talk about her connections a little bit, but one of her connections is with work, which is great.
Anyone else want to share before we move on? Also, if I want to offer this, if you would like to, and Cody, help me out here, if somebody, it's hard for them or not possible for them to type into the chat and they would like to speak their response, if they can unmute and say their response, they're welcome to do that as well. Okay, and keep that in mind for, we've got another poll question at the very end, and the same goes for that. You can type it in the chat, or if you need to or want to, you can speak it as well. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Virginia, for getting us started. I'm going to share my screen now with everybody. Just give me a second to get that done. Okay. So welcome to our presentation. We also have our poll question, which we just completed. And if you have ideas throughout the presentation or questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will try to get to them at the end. So how this kind of presentation came about was over the last year, Virginia and myself had been communicating with parents, school members, community members of that work with individuals with disabilities in the transition aged. So I always think that like 16 to 21-year-old age range. And one of the things that we found within our conversations that we had were it was really hard for individuals to connect to their communities past high school. Once they graduated or aged out of their high school program, they just didn't know what to do. So that was kind of the challenge that we identified, and that was one of the big challenges we identified. So how do we create those community connections and lasting connections so they can continue to grow? And not to mention, how do we teach those connections and how do we help them form those connections? So that's kind of the big question we're going to be talking about today is how do we start creating those connections and how do we continue those connections? So I think the biggest thing is when I was thinking about this and thinking about this presentation and how we want to do it, I always think of our young adults or the members that we work with in our organization and think of them as kind of like a tree. Just like everybody else in the world, we're growing, we're changing. And one thing that always changes and grows is a tree. And especially right now is a perfect example. Our leaves are falling off because of fall and we're changing colors and we kind of get a new refresh in the spring. So super exciting. So I'm going to use the analogy of a tree. So for us, I kind of broke it down into 4 parts. So level 1 is the trunk. So that's the biggest part of the tree. It's the main part of the tree, and it should be the focus of anything we do. So within our presentation today, our trunk is going to be our young adults or our self-advocates. It can also be yourself. This can very much be something that we do with ourselves as well. Level 2 is the limbs. So these are like the really thick branches that are really close to the trunk. And this is going to be the daily activities locations, and we'll kind of break that down. We have level 3, our branches. And these are kind of the ones off the limb, pretty strong, pretty firm, but still growing and changing. And then level 4, we have our newer branches, which are the connections made. And the leaves, we can even like throw the social connections in there as our leaves, which I think is cool. So level 1 is our young adult, kind of like I had mentioned. We need to start with a focal point. So for our presentation and the individuals we work with is this will always be our members. Everything we do in an organization is member driven, as well as, you know, anything while we're here as well, I think is really important it should be you focused. So, and they're all different, just like a tree, which is kind of cool. The limbs. So this is always a really great starting point for connection. These are things that if they're already engaged in or you're already engaged in, which I think is great. And we should really branch out from those. So how do we take what we're already engaged in and kind of stretch it further and further and further? Because that's how those connections are made. So this can be kind of some examples: school, work, sports teams, interests, maybe clubs are involved in, anything like that. Level 3 are those branches. Like I said, they're kind of off the limb, but they're still pretty strong and, you know, ready to grow and change. The branches are really the start of that connection point. This could be where our young adults go for activities, someone they always might go with, or even an interest they have to explore within. And then lastly, we have our level 4. These are the newest branches. These are the little baby branches that could grow and become stronger branches. But right now they're just really new and little. Some might even call them twigs. So these are kind of the leaves, the social connections, and is really where our young adults kind of keep growing from. And these might change with each season, just like, twigs fall on the ground sometimes. Those connections might be broken, but other connections are formed. So it's changing, which is the best way to think about it. So for us we do this with our Bridge Builder project as an organization, but we really want to kind of talk you through what it's like to have these conversations with the youth and really break it down for yourself and for members you potentially work with, which is or self-advocates, young adults that you work with. We'll throw in all the terms. So I'm going to toss it back to Virginia. And I'm going to stop my screen share, but restart it. And she is going to talk through an example with Nicole on how to utilize this. I will also be putting a link to the worksheet that we've created with this model in the chat so you guys can follow along with it. And we will also have some time at the end where you can work on this by yourself.
Does anybody have any questions at this point before we move on to the worksheet? Thanks for that explanation of our diagram, Lauren. I just want to make sure you don't have any questions for clarification or anything before we move on. Okay. All right. So Nicole, you mentioned in the chat at the beginning with the poll question that you feel connected through your job at Goodwill. So should we put that as one of your activity/location entries? Okay. And so at Goodwill, in what ways do you feel connected there? Do you have like coworkers that you talk with, or?
Yeah, and my managers and stuff like that.
Coworkers and managers, okay.
Yeah, because, well, in the morning I have to talk to my manager, obviously, to get my assignment for the day, like what I'll be doing and stuff.
Uh-huh. Okay. And then like at lunch, do you hang out with coworkers or managers
Well,
sometimes?
Depending on depending on when their break is, which their lunch break might be different than mine. So I usually don't see a whole lot of people when I'm on my lunch.
Right. But there are some times, right, when you get to hang out with somebody in the break room. Cool. So we'll use those occasions when you are hanging out with a coworker during a break or lunchtime as one of your possible opportunities for connection and exploring interests here. And then I think another really major interest and connection of yours is karate. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Great. So, or would you like to talk about your penguin project?
Yeah, actually, let's just do penguin project.
Okay. So the Penguin Project Theater Group that you're part of? Yeah. Okay. So, and at the Penguin Project, do you have some friends or some fellow cast members there that you also, in addition to putting on the productions, that you get to like talk more casually with?
Well, I have my mentor's phone number, and I've been just like reaching out to her and just asking her how she's doing and stuff, because that's what you do as a friend. You like text them and like FaceTime them when they're not busy.
Right. Yeah, have some boundaries, but stay connected. That's great. So your mentor from the Penguin Project. So there's the artists and the mentors, and they work together on these productions. So maybe a connection with a mentor from the Penguin Project. Great. Okay. So so with the Penguin Project, you guys are putting on like plays and musicals, right?
Yeah. Well,
And
this year we didn't do one because we just did our theme song called Don't Stop Believing" or something.
yeah, that's
But
it. Yep.
next year we're doing the Music Man Junior.
Wonderful. And you enjoy musicals, both with Penguin Project and in general, right? Like attending
Yeah,
them?
because I did some at Chums, I think, like Cinderella, Bibbidi, Digit, all those, like, oh yeah, and Camp Chaos. That was really fun too.
Awesome. So do you ever attend musicals, like at Overture Center or anything like that?
Not really. I
Would you like
tried
to?
to. I would
Yeah. So
if
could that
I'm not.
be, or maybe even like a high school musical at a local high school, like
Yeah,
in Sun Prairie or in
I
Madison?
think I went to. Yeah, I went to a couple with my mom. We saw Peter Pan, um,
Great.
Mary Poppins and stuff like that.
So instead of going with your mom, would it be fun for you to go with a friend that you made through the Penguin Project, since you
Yeah.
guys share that interest? Yeah. So do you think that maybe we could put on the worksheet that that's like a possible connection for you is going to a musical, either high school musical or at Overture, uh, with a friend from Penguin Project?
Yeah.
Right. So you take this already awesome interest and activity that you have, which is the Penguin Project, and you grow an extra branch off of it, or even a twig of like, hey, let's go do this thing together outside of the activity and like develop our friendship and our hobby and our interest further together. And maybe we'll do it again sometime, right? So the potential for a lasting relationship outside of the original activity. And then like going back to your goodwill break room conversation with a friend, a coworker. I think I mentioned this earlier, but you are also really active and good at karate. So for the purposes of this worksheet, and showing folks how this could work, let's imagine that you're in a conversation with someone in the break room, a coworker, and you mentioned that after work today, you're going to go to karate. And they're like, oh, tell me more about karate. And then you find out, or maybe you ask, oh, are you interested in karate? Would you like to maybe come see me at the karate studio sometime? So there's an opportunity to take that friendship that you've got at Goodwill. That's really nice to have people who are friendly and that you know and that you're like comfortable with at your job, but you can even take that and like expand it further into a friendship
Yeah,
outside of
like
work,
make it
right?
bigger.
Right, and add another branch to the limb of your growing tree. And maybe that person would even end up wanting to take karate classes with you. Who knows, right?
That would be
Are
so
you picturing
fun.
someone in particular?
Probably somebody for my black belt test.
Awesome. So yeah, so that's for the participants watching. I hope that that sort of made sense. I tried to make it as like real life sounding as possible so that you can see how your thought process can develop as you work on this worksheet. And now Lauren is going to encourage everybody to give it a try yourselves. Thanks, Nicole.
Mhm.
Awesome job. I also think, I also just want to touch base too, and talk about how those connections that are formed could be lasting connections if they would like to be, and they would like to blossom into something bigger, which I think is great. Nicole kind of touched on like that growing and like, how do I grow my circle? And that's exactly what we're doing here. Kind of growing your circle based on what you're already involved in, what you're already in, and really branching it out. So Virginia gave some great examples, like maybe that person would want to take karate with you. Or it could even come back to work. And Nicole mentioned somebody from her black belt test. Maybe that person's looking for a job and Nicole would be like, come work with me at Goodwill. Like, it's awesome.
It's awesome here.
Exactly. So, I mean, those connections can just keep linking and link in different ways. And again, it can be super simple things. It doesn't have to be extravagant. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. You can really base it around what feels right for you and what feels right for that coworker, that peer that you want to be connected with. So I did put a link to the worksheet in our chat. So hopefully everybody can access that. It is also on the conference website under materials, under our session materials. But we want to give everybody a chance to try this. So think about it for yourself, maybe for somebody that you work with, really anybody, and how can you branch out from what you're already doing. We'd love to give more examples. If you have an idea of a starting point, we could also help create those next steps for you as well. So yeah.
That's a good point, Lauren. If anybody is having some trouble thinking about like, gosh, I don't know how I could possibly take this interest and turn it into a connection, feel free to put it in the chat or unmute yourself and just say like what your interest is. And maybe the group can help you brainstorm a connection to make from that.
Cody, would it also be possible if we could allow people to turn on their videos during this time? So yeah, so if you feel comfortable, feel free to unmute yourself. We can kind of create a really good open dialogue for different ideas and brainstorming, which is a huge part of this session as well, because it's always nice to brainstorm things that we do. Give everybody a few minutes just to try this on their own, try the worksheet, and let us know if you have questions.
If you were unable to fill out the worksheet itself, It's also probably a simple enough concept that you could do it on a piece of paper or on Microsoft Word blank document where you just write down the interest, write down the place or activity that you already go, and write down somebody that you know from that place or activity and a possible interest that you might share with that person, and then a possible community connection that might grow from that shared interest. And then another opportunity beyond just writing it down is in a few minutes, Lauren will be inviting people to share out. So be thinking of one, even if you're not writing it down, that you can share with the group.
We'll give everybody a few more minutes. And if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat as well.
I wish we could be walking around talking with people in person about what they're putting on their worksheets.
One downfall of being virtual.
Hopefully next year we'll be back in person.
Yes. Okay. Well, let's kind of come back together and regroup. Like Virginia said, it would be wonderful if we could just be walking around and talking, but fortunately, COVID has prevented that for one more year. Hopefully the final year. But what were some of your guys' ideas? So what were some of the connections made? Or even just examples of things you're doing that you want to foster those connections to create more? Even just a location that maybe you could use some help brainstorming from others in this group. Okay, so I'm going to pick on Emily just because I know her. So she's a self-advocate I've worked with in the past and continue to work with. Emily, what was one of your examples that you put down?
So I guess I can just share that I am actually a member of Love Inc. and Virginia, if I can pick on you, is my bridge builder. So I guess for me, it would be like establishing a connection through being a part of the Bridgewater project. But I did put in the chat that I don't want it so much to be something I do through Love Inc. Necessarily. So I guess that even though it's like not going to a place like you said, of whatever you just said, sorry, Lauren. Anyway, like it's just being a part of an organization, but not being somewhere, like just meeting with a bridge builder. So that is something that I definitely want to work on. Ideas that I have, let's see, possibly pursuing knitting again, maybe even, I think there's a reason why I can't, but like the whole like ability marketplace thing and stuff. I was looking at all that because I got the coupon or whatever for being a part of this conference. Yeah, let's put that out there for now, I guess.
Oh, that's perfect. I also think too, just kind of the connections you've already made, Emily. So yeah, this Love Inc. was a good starting point, but you've created friendships through this organization and connections even through us that you've maintained outside of love, which I think is really great. Going on walks, meeting others, those are all very easy, simple things to do. Emily gave the idea of arts and crafts. I know I'm a big arts and craft person. So it's always fun to be able to connect with people and do a craft together, do a project together.
And Emily mentioned knitting. She's knits personally. She's learning how to knit on her own, but she also, before COVID, joined a knitting group at a local Madison Library branch. And I remember, Emily, that you said that there was one time you were on the city bus, and on the bus was somebody that you had met through your knitting group.
Right, yeah.
Which is, you know, like, again, just that neat thing. That was just a one-time temporary thing, but it's just like, it shows how, you know, your bridge builder told you about this knitting group. You went to the knitting group and were a regular attendee, and then saw this person on the bus and like had this moment of humanity and personal connection on the city bus while you were just out and about, and you recognize each other and had that friendly moment together. So, I mean, there's the lasting connections and activities and so forth, but there's also that kind of thing too that fosters, you know, all kinds of great stuff. Just for you, the other person from the knitting group, the people on the bus that saw that friendly exchange, you know what I mean? It's just like, there's all different ways to create and foster connections, I think.
Right. And I mean, if you do see someone like that you on a bus or something, that's a part of an organization that you're in or whatever, small group thing, a hobby that you have or anything like that, like it's like kind of like a highlight of your day. Like it's just very like uplifting. Oh yeah, I know you. And that actually was like from work or whatever, I would run into her. So it happened quite a few times actually.
Oh, did it? Okay. That's neat.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think the biggest thing that I want to just touch on as well is how and why we should do this with our young adults, and especially those individuals in that transition age, post high school life. It's just really important to start these connections early, so then they continue, and when they're new, they're really supported. And then once they're kind of out of high school, they can continue them personally. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be, you know, a face-to-face getting together. Virtual connections are very much a real thing, especially in the world we live in. I work with individuals that have connections with friends in other countries because of video gaming systems. So those connections can kind of be formed in multiple ways right now, which I think is really great. Did anybody else have an example or someplace that a good starting point? I always think is good too.
Thanks for bringing up the high school transition piece again, Lauren. While people are either writing that in the chat or getting up the nerve to say something out into the group, I'll just speak a little bit more about that as well. As Lauren said, as we were talking with families and school staff and others about what happens, what has happened for their loved ones or the people they've worked with after the high school transition to adulthood. And it's been really, really challenging. And yes, the community connection or the friend connection has been probably the hardest one, especially since, high school provides that, like that ready-made community, and then that's taken away. So anything that people can do, whether you're a family member, whether you're school staff, whether you're at an agency, anything you can do to notice an interest or a passion in the person you're working with and start fostering that really, really early. For example, if the person, let's just say, likes, pets, it doesn't have to be that suddenly they're signed up for a weekly shift at the Humane Society, but maybe they can, while they're still in high school, maybe they can start walking a neighbor's dog or cat sitting for a family member or something like that. And then they can, sort of develop some pre-employment skills that way. They can have the connection outside of the home with the neighbor or the other family member. There can be, those clubs that hopefully our folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities are joining in high school, those end. But maybe you see what clubs they're a part of and you look for rec activities. You look for just your own friends or neighbors that are part of that same kind of activity out in the world, and maybe get them included in something, even if they're just coming to it at first and they're not actually joining in, because a lot of times there'll be like that one person, and that's the thing you want to look for, is who is responding positively to that young adult when they're in that setting, and then fostering that relationship between them, and you never know where that's going to go.
Yeah, and Virginia kind of touched on this, just the life skill aspect too is so important. Making those connections and creating them, and fostering those connections, create a lot of really good life skills for our younger members, or our, transitioned age adults, just because that is hard. So maybe it is a connection to a future employer or future job placement. But getting out in the community really helps them learn some of the skills. Bus transportation, Emily kind of touched on. Scheduling, I think, is really big. And I know that's something that Nicole works really hard on, is making sure that everything is ready to go for, certain events. And I think that's really important to learn early on. And especially for working with individuals with disabilities, teaching those skills early and giving them those independent moments are really, really helpful. And if it's a social connection, it's way more fun to schedule than a doctor's appointment or dentist appointment. It's something fun that they take ownership of.
So I actually have one more example with that, or one more thing to say about the example I was sharing earlier with the person I saw on the bus from knitting group. So it's also just like challenging yourself to I would actually tell her oh, was it 3 days ago I saw you on the bus? So it was in general, it's just a social connection, and it's good for you to practice your social skills. But for that specific example, it was also kind of quizzing myself, oh, wow, I was right. It was 3 days ago I saw her. Oh, okay. Are you coming whatever? If it was Thursday, I'd be okay, are you coming to knit group on Tuesday? It was just a really nice connection. I would still recognize her if I saw her today. And It was only whatever, about 2 years ago, I guess, at this point. So yeah, I mean, who knows? I might run into somebody else from the knit group and something else might come of that or whatever. So I just wanted to say that.
Thanks, Emily. It's as if we
Yeah.
like invited you to participate in our session, and it's actually just a pleasant surprise to have you here. So thank you
Yeah.
for your contributions.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And something that Nicole mentioned earlier too is, you know, when those clubs or organizations are done or don't have events, continuing those conversations in a personal way, sending texts, you know, setting up a FaceTime, things like that can be really helpful and empowering for everybody. And honestly, right now, I think that social connection is just so important because we don't always get it, especially if you live in Wisconsin, it's getting colder. So bundling up takes a little bit more work, but just checking in with those connections that you've made really helps as well. So Virginia, do you want to do our final poll?
Sure. 1 second here. All right. So just to have you thinking about things as we wrap up today. Let's see, did it show up?
I do not see it.
It's not there. That's so weird. Okay. There we go. No,
Nope, I can put it in the chat too.
it's weird because I'm hitting paste and then I'm hitting enter and it's not going in.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I was actually, I had edited it slightly, again, to like offer 2 questions. So if you are someone who works with young adults, can you think of someone like that you might take this and use this method with? Or if you yourself are someone with an intellectual or developmental disability attending the session, is there a way that you could use this personally, that you're going to take this out into your everyday life or social connection planning for the future? Oh, there. See?
It is.
I don't know why. Now you get it 3 times.
Yes. So Nicole, I'm gonna pick on you one more time. What's one way that you're going to use this for yourself, this method that we've worked on?
I don't know. I mean, just keep it in the back of my head.
Yeah, and that's perfect. Also just creating those conversations at work, I think is a good way for a good starting point for you, Nicole. Perfect. Erica, thanks for sharing. Erica said, I can see how I can use this to grow my connections further in her community, which is awesome. And also teach my granddaughter this method to help grow, you know, to help her planning grow. And that's exactly what we're hoping to do is take this method and teach others, show others, and adapt it for yourself is really important. So thank you, Erica, for sharing.
Since we have a little bit of time left and I want to make sure, oh, here's another response. So I'll come back to that, but I'll read Jenna's response. I work with young adults and I think many could benefit from this method. It really helps with teaching positive social behavior and how to engage with others when it doesn't come naturally. Great. I'm glad this helps provide a framework for you. Did you want to say something, Lauren?
No, I was just going to comment on what Jenna said. I think it's perfect. That positive social behavior, I think, is a perfect way to put it. And it's something that's so important to teach, especially in a world that we live in right now, where we have a lot of younger individuals that have only interacted with a lot of people via Zoom or via computer screen. So teaching those interactions early is really important.
Great. So and feel free to continue to put something in the chat if you want, but I just wanted to say as well, if there was something you were hoping to get from this session that you didn't today, please feel free to either chat, put that in the chat to everyone, or you can directly message me or Lauren. We can also provide our email addresses if there was something you were hoping to get from this session that we didn't cover. We'd love to address that right now or in a follow-up email. Lauren, are you putting? Great. I'll put mine in there. Are you doing mine too?
I'm doing yours as well.
Okay, you're awesome. Thank you. And I think mine is, my email address is actually wrong in the program in my bio. So not that I'm expecting to get a lot of emails as a result of being in the bio in the program, but there's the corrected email if you do need to email me. Don't think, oh, I'll just get it out of the program later, because it's missing the C.
Yeah, and honestly, this is, we really want to leave the last few minutes up for everybody. So if there's questions that you had while filling it out, or maybe you have an individual that you worked with that you're just like, I don't know a good starting point. Like, sometimes those brainstorming moments can be the most helpful. So
especially when you've got a group of people gathered here that might be able to help you too.
I also want to circle back. So Tara had mentioned earlier in the session that I have to find it. She's working on growing those connections. Tara, was this helpful? Maybe were you able to think about one way you were able to do that just through this process?
I think building your community patterns is an ever-growing thing. So, I've lived in Sun Prairie for 12 years, but in all honesty, I find new connections all the time. And I think it's just constantly important to remain open to building more connections. So.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. I agree. I think, and the connections are ever changing, like Tara said. I know my community connections have changed. I became a mom recently. So there's this whole other aspect of my life that I get to build and grow my community from as well, which is really fun.
Nicole, is there anything else that you would like to share?
No.
Nicole, do you want to share a little bit more about the Penguin Project?
Yeah.
Just so people understand a little bit more what it is.
So Penguin Project is where we put on a production where an artist is paired with a mentor, and the mentor actually stays with you like for rehearsals, even tech week, and then when it's time for the show, they will stay with you and like assist you with your lines, dancing. I mean, not dancing, but like the moves to whatever the song, costume help if they need help putting the costume on. That's basically what I can describe Penguin Project.
Yeah, that's
Great.
perfect.
Thank you.
And I believe it is based in Sun Prairie. just outside of Madison. But I'm sure there's tons of theater groups in everybody's area, or at least I hope there is. Well, if anybody wants to stay on for a few more minutes, we do have a few minutes. The session does end at 1:30, but feel free to ask questions. But we want to thank you for joining us and learning this and learning about it. And our emails are in the chat. So if you do have questions, Virginia and I would be happy to answer them personally as well. So.
Yes, thanks so much for coming, everyone.